The faculty president, a tall guy who played for the university's official football team, knew it. As the game began, I quickly found myself in the zone. The ball felt like an extension of my body. I could hear the rhythm of the game in my head, the sound of the ball tapping the turf underfoot, the faint cheers of the crowd. My mind was clear, focused only on the match. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this game was more than just a football match. It was a statement. I had something to prove, not just to my classmates, but to the senator's daughter, whose eyes I knew would be watching me from somewhere in the crowd. The tension between us had been palpable in class, and I had no intention of letting it simmer without a show of my own. The ball came to me in the midfield and instinct took over. I weaved past a few defenders, quick on my feet, as I darted toward the opposition's goal. Then, there he was, Emeka, the president of our faculty, standing at the back, trying to block my path. Emeka was known for being a solid player, but I could tell by the way he squared up to me that he wasn't sure how to handle me. There was hesitation in his eyes. He wasn't sure whether to commit fully or to hang back, waiting for support. That was all I needed. I faked left, then dribbled right, sliding the ball effortlessly through his legs. Emeka tried to recover, but I was already in motion, my legs driving the ball forward. I could hear the collective gasp from the crowd. The players on both teams were watching, some shouting out encouragement, others in disbelief. As I approached the goal, I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins. The goalkeeper, a guy I'd faced before in other matches, stepped forward to challenge me. But this time I was ready. A quick flick of my right foot, and the ball slipped past him, landing in the back of the net. The crowd erupted in cheers. I stood there for a moment, my chest heaving, my teammates rushing toward me to celebrate. But as the crowd settled, I couldn't help but notice Eve standing in the stands with her friends. She had a soft smile on her face, watching me, as if she was trying to make sense of what she had just witnessed. There was no mistaking it. She had seen me in class, trying to prove myself academically, but this was different. This was me showing the world what I could do when the pressure was on, what I could do when the stakes were high. The rest of the match was a blur, but I could feel the shift. Every dribble, every pass, every play became a statement. My performance in the VC Cup was more than just a game, it was a declaration. I wasn't just a brilliant student trying to outshine her in class, I was someone who could excel in every arena, no matter the odds. By the end of the tournament, I was the top scorer, my name echoing through the halls, my performance on the pitch cementing my status as a standout player. As I walked off the field after winning the final match, I felt a sense of accomplishment that no exam, no grade, could ever give me. At that moment, it wasn't about being first in the class rankings anymore. It was about proving to myself that I could thrive, no matter where I was placed or who I was up against. What had begun as a friendly rivalry between the senator's daughter and me had evolved into something much more intense, almost palpable. In the lecture halls, there was a noticeable shift. Every eye seemed to be on us, waiting to see who would edge out the other. The tension was no longer just about grades, it was about proving something deeper. It was about showing that we could be more than just the titles we carried, whether that was my humble background or her powerful name. As the weeks went by, our competitive glances in class began to linger a little longer. When the professor asked a difficult question, we both dived at it without hesitation, each of us hoping to be the first to answer, to show that we had the upper hand. But something had started to shift inside me. I started noticing how she would smile to herself when she got a question right or how she would chew on the tip of her pen when she was thinking. It was those small details that made her human, that made her more than just the image I had built up in my mind. And for the first time, I began to appreciate her for more than just the competition. One afternoon, the atmosphere in the library was particularly charged. It was quiet, the only sounds being the occasional rustle of paper or the soft tap of keyboards. The walls were lined with shelves of books, and the light from the large windows cast a warm, golden glow over everything. Few students sat at tables scattered throughout the room, some reading, others typing away on their laptops, but there was a clear energy between us in the corner, where we both sat at opposite ends of a long wooden table. We had come for a study session, though neither of us had said much beyond the obligatory greeting. The library was my sanctuary. It was where I felt most at home, surrounded by knowledge and the peace that came with knowing I could lose myself in the quiet hum of academia. I had always been able to concentrate here, to focus on my work without distractions. But today, as Eve sat across from me, I couldn't help but notice how different the room felt. There was an invisible thread connecting us, one that neither of us acknowledged but both felt. The books between us, stacked and organized with our notes, became less about the subject matter and more about the space we occupied in each other's thoughts. I could see her from the corner of my eye, her brow furrowed in concentration as she flipped through her textbook, the slight bounce in her leg showing her nervous energy. It was then that I realized how much I had begun to respect her. She wasn't just a privileged student with a powerful family. She was driven, focused, and just as dedicated to her studies as I was. And in that moment, the rivalry seemed less like a competition and more like a partnership, one built on shared goals and mutual respect. Then, something unexpected happened. The atmosphere in the library changed, as though the room itself was holding its breath. I felt the familiar rush of energy build within me. The VC Cup football match was still fresh in my mind the way I had dribbled past Emeka, the faculty president, to score the winning goal. That moment felt like a declaration to myself. I didn't just want to be recognized as the best student, I wanted to be seen as someone who could excel in every arena. It was after that match, as I entered the library to find a quiet spot to study, that I noticed her glancing at me. At first, I thought I imagined it, but as I settled into my seat, I saw her watching me, not with the same competitive edge she often wore, but with something softer. There was curiosity in her eyes, a glimmer of something unspoken between us. I wasn't sure if she saw me as just another opponent or something more, but for a moment, it didn't matter. For the first time, we sat in that library together, not as rivals, but as two students who had come to understand each other's strengths. The silence between us was no longer uncomfortable. It was peaceful, even comforting. I couldn't explain it, but at that moment, I realized that maybe this rivalry, this intense, nerve-wracking tension had become something else. It was no longer just about outshining one another. It was about recognition, not just of our intellect, but of the effort and sacrifice it took to get there. I could see her absently tapping her pencil on her notebook, lost in thought. For the first time, I didn't want to compete with her. I wanted to be the one who shared the spotlight, who helped her see that we could both succeed, not just in our studies, but in how we understood one another. The rivalry, it seemed, was beginning to fade into the background, replaced by something far more complicated, far more personal. And I couldn't deny that it felt like the beginning of something neither of us had planned. It's funny how small moments can shift everything, how something as simple as a glance or a shared task can ignite feelings that you never expected to develop. I never intended for things to change between the senator's daughter and me. We were rivals, constantly vying for the top spot in every class, in every exam. Our competition had been intense, almost suffocating at times, but there was always something undeniably magnetic about her. And I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't just the rivalry anymore. As time passed, we found ourselves in moments where the competition faded, even if just for a second. One of those moments happened in the library, a place I'd always considered my sanctuary. It was where I felt most at home, surrounded by books, the hum of quiet study groups, the soft clack of keyboards, and the occasional whispered conversation. I loved the structure of it, the sense that here, in this space, things could slow down, allowing me to focus on what mattered most, excelling in my studies. The day I first noticed the shift, it was just another routine study session. I had found a spot in the back corner of the library, close to a window where the afternoon sun poured through, casting warm golden light over the books and tables. It was quiet, just the sound of pages turning and the distant rustling of paper. My friends were scattered across the room, working on their assignments. And I had my head buried in a particularly difficult set of problems for business statistics. But then I felt the subtle energy in the air. She entered the library as composed and poised as ever, her presence immediately filling the space. The senator's daughter, though undeniably brilliant, had a way of moving through life with a kind of ease that always intrigued me. It wasn't just about her looks, her father's name, or the image of perfection she projected. It was the way she could effortlessly command attention and respect without trying. I noticed her glancing my way as she walked past my table, and I couldn't help but glance up at her. For a brief second, our eyes met, and in that fleeting moment, something unspoken passed between us. It wasn't the same look of rivalry I was so accustomed to. It wasn't a competition. No, this time, it felt like an acknowledgement of sorts, a mutual understanding of the pressure we were both under. She didn't say a word, but I could feel her presence linger, and as she took a seat a few tables away, I couldn't help but focus on the sound of her pencil scratching on paper. The library was a sanctuary for both of us, I realized. A place where we could bury the weight of everything else, the expectations, the competition, and just breathe for a moment. Later that week, a small study group formed for our corporate finance class. As usual, I found myself submerged in the complex world of interest rates, amortization schedules, and future value calculations. But this time, I wasn't alone. The senator's daughter, who had been hovering around the library shelves looking for some extra resources, noticed me and asked if I needed any help with a particularly tough problem. I had been struggling with a complex equation, one of those that seemed to stretch on forever, and her voice broke my focus. "Do you need help with that?" she asked, her tone almost too casual, but with just a hint of genuine interest. I had to admit I was slightly surprised. After all, we were usually at odds, competing for the same grades, the same recognition. But here she was, offering assistance. I hesitated for a second before nodding. "Yeah, actually, I could use some help." She came over to my table and sat beside me. Her presence felt different, less like a fierce competitor and more like a peer, someone who understood the struggle of trying to figure out the complexities of finance. Together, we went over the formula, and with her help, I finally cracked the equation. As I looked up to thank her, I noticed something in her eyes that I hadn't seen before, something soft, almost vulnerable. In that moment, I realized that this wasn't just about us trying to outdo each other. This was about two people who understood the pressure of living up to expectations, whether from our families, professors, or peers. The competition was still there, but it had taken a back seat to something deeper, something far more personal. Later that day, I was walking to the library again when a few of my course mates and Emeka, the faculty president, stopped me. They'd seen my performance in the VC Cup football match, where I had scored a winning goal by dribbling past Emeka himself. It was a moment of triumph, but also a moment that showcased my abilities beyond just academics. "Man, you really showed Emeka up," one of them said, patting me on the back. I couldn't help but smile, recalling the rush of adrenaline as I had weaved my way through Emeka, the faculty president, with smooth, practiced moves. His attempts to block me were futile, and with a quick turn of my foot, I sent the ball into the net. The cheers that followed were still ringing in my ears as I relished that moment, not just for the win, but for the message it sent. I wasn't just a student, I was someone who could excel in every arena, and I had the chance to prove it. As I walked away from the group, I couldn't help but glance over at her again. This time, she was sitting in the same corner of the library, completely engrossed in her work, the faintest smile playing on her lips. It was a simple moment, but one that spoke volumes. Something had shifted between us that started as rivalry had slowly turned into something more. There's something about the university's late afternoons that always pulls me in. Maybe it's the soft glow of the setting sun, casting long shadows across the campus, or the quiet hum of students drifting from one lecture to the next, their voices blending with the rustling leaves of the trees around. It's a peaceful kind of chaos, where the weight of the world seems to settle just enough to make room for a conversation that can change everything. And that afternoon, I found myself caught in just such a moment. The day had been intense, filled with the usual academic rivalry between the senator's daughter and me. The same kind of competition we'd grown accustomed to in class, always trying to one-up the other, never truly acknowledging how similar we were beneath it all. But that afternoon, something shifted. We had just finished an afternoon lecture, and the air felt different, charged with an unspoken energy. We didn't speak much during the class. We rarely did. She was always surrounded by her friends, the ones who seemed to float in a world of privilege and power. And I kept to myself, focused on the material, doing what I could to stay ahead. But that afternoon, it was as if the universe had set the stage for something more. As I left the lecture hall, I found myself walking beside her. For the first time, it wasn't out of competition, it was simply by chance. Her friends had stayed behind to chat about something trivial, and I was just there. The silence between us felt comfortable, the kind of silence that comes when two people are used to their own thoughts. But that day, the quiet was almost heavy, as though it was waiting for something to break it. And then it did. Eve spoke first, her voice low but genuine. "I see you out there," she said, her eyes focused on the ground ahead. "You're good, you know. Really good. On the field, in class." Her words surprised me. They weren't competitive or dismissive, as they usually were. There was a softness to her voice I hadn't heard before. She wasn't looking for a way to one-up me. Instead, she seemed to be acknowledging something real. I paused for a moment, unsure of what to say. The words that followed came more naturally than I expected, almost as if I had been waiting to say them to someone who might actually listen. "Yeah," I replied, my voice a little too rough. "But it's not easy, you know. My family isn't like yours. My dad's shop doesn't exactly pay for all the things people expect from me. My mom, she works hard to keep things together. I guess that's what drives me. I have to be good at everything. Otherwise, I don't know where I'd end up." It was strange talking like this. I wasn't used to opening up, especially to someone like her. But there was something about the way she stood there, quietly listening, that made it feel easier. She didn't interrupt, didn't make any jokes about my family or my situation. It felt real, honest. For a moment, there was only silence again this time, the kind that felt comfortable. But then she spoke again. "I get it," she said. "I do. My family. Everyone expects perfection. My dad's always in the spotlight, always making decisions, and I'm just supposed to fit in. Live up to everything he's built. It's exhausting. It's like, no matter how hard I try, it's never enough. And everyone's always looking at me, waiting for me to screw up." There was the side of her I hadn't seen. The girl behind the polished image, behind the expectations of her father's legacy. At that moment, I realized that she wasn't so different from me. We were both caught in a web of expectations, each fighting to prove our worth in a world that seemed determined to judge us before we could even speak. She met my eyes then, and for the first time, I saw vulnerability there, something raw, something real. I could tell she wasn't just talking about the pressure of living up to her father's name. She was talking about something deeper, the struggle to be seen for who she really was, not just as a reflection of her family's power. Before I could respond, we were interrupted by a voice calling out from behind us. It was Gloria, her friend, the one who had always been supportive of her, always backing her up, no matter what. Gloria's voice was as sharp as ever, but there was a hint of something softer when she spoke to the senator's daughter. "Hey, are you coming? We're heading to the cafe," Gloria called out, her tone light but still filled with that familiar air of superiority. But what caught me off guard was the way Juliet, another of the senator's daughter's friends, and the one who always seemed to question her, stayed back. She didn't seem thrilled about the moment we had just shared. I could see the disapproval in her eyes. It was subtle, but it was there. She didn't like the fact that the senator's daughter and I had shared something so real. For a moment, I could almost hear her thoughts. "This isn't how it's supposed to go. He's not supposed to be someone you talk to like that." Eve glanced at me, then at her friends. Her decision was almost instantaneous. "I'll catch up with you guys later," she said softly, as if making a choice for herself for the first time in a long while. "I've got something to think about." And just like that, she walked away, leaving me standing there, caught between two worlds, one that expected me to keep fighting, and another that was slowly starting to embrace something far deeper than competition. And as I stood there, watching her walk away, I realized something else, that maybe, just maybe, we were both tired of being defined by our families, by our pasts. And that, in some strange way, the very competition that had brought us here could be the thing that finally connected us. The campus itself, a sprawling mix of modern buildings and ancient trees, seemed to echo the tensions that ran beneath the surface of student life. Between the academic rivalry that had come to define my days and the growing, unspoken connection with the senator's daughter, I felt as though I were standing at the edge of a precipice, unsure whether to jump or retreat. It was a quiet afternoon, the sun casting long shadows across the pathways that ran between the lecture halls and the library. I was walking to my next class, lost in thought, when I saw her. She stood near the university's fountain, her silhouette framed by the golden light of the setting sun, surrounded by her usual entourage. Gloria, Juliet, and a few others were laughing, their voices carrying across the open space, but the senator's daughter seemed distant, caught somewhere between their banter and her own thoughts. For a moment I stood frozen. It wasn't just her beauty that stopped me, it was the way she carried herself, always so poised, yet now, there was something different in the way she held herself. Something vulnerable. We had been circling each other for months now, an endless cycle of competition and brief moments of connection. Our rivalry had been fierce, relentless. Every time we found ourselves in the same room, the same lecture hall, we seemed to battle for supremacy not just in grades, but in every way. Yet, there were moments, small, fleeting moments where I saw something more in her. A smile shared over an answer in class, a glance that lasted just a bit longer than usual, a subtle nod of acknowledgement after I had helped her with a complicated question. It was those moments that were starting to blur the lines between rivalry and something else entirely. I couldn't help but feel the weight of the conflict building inside me. As I made my way toward the fountain, I found myself drawing closer to her, despite the invisible barrier between us. When Eve noticed me, her expression shifted, as though she had been caught in the act of something personal. Her eyes flickered briefly, then softened. "Hey," she said, her voice warm but hesitant, as if unsure whether this conversation was going to be more than just the usual exchanges. "Hey," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady, though I could feel the tension rising. This wasn't just about academics anymore. It hadn't been for a while. She motioned for me to join her, and I hesitated for a moment, caught between the urge to walk away and the need to see where this unspoken connection was going. The others continued chatting, but it was clear she had momentarily stepped away from her friends, stepping away from the persona she always wore. We were alone in a sense, even though we stood in the middle of a bustling campus. "I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this," she said, her voice lowering slightly as she leaned against the stone edge of the fountain. The water trickled peacefully behind her, a stark contrast to the whirlwind inside me. I blinked in surprise, not expecting her to open up like this. "Keep doing what?" I asked, genuinely curious. "This competition." Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw the exhaustion behind her polished exterior. "It's like I can't stop. It's all I've known. I've spent my whole life living up to something, to someone else's expectations. And now, it feels like it's not enough. I don't know if I want this anymore." Her words hit me harder than I expected. She was always the one who had everything, her family, her name, the respect of everyone around her. But in that moment, I realized that perhaps all that outward perfection had come at a cost. The realization sank in. She wasn't just fighting me, she was fighting herself. And in that struggle, I wasn't just another opponent. I was someone who understood, someone who had also fought against expectations, against the world around me. We were both trapped in this never-ending cycle, bound by the weight of our own ambitions, the pressure to outdo one another, to be more than we were. But beneath all that, I could see the growing attraction between us, the subtle shifts in how we interacted, the unspoken understanding that had begun to blossom between the fierce competition and the budding feelings we couldn't deny. "I feel the same way," I said, my voice softer now. "It's not just the grades for me anymore. I think about what I want to do with all this. And then I wonder if it's even worth it." Her gaze lingered on me for a moment, and I could see the conflict in her eyes. The same conflict I had been feeling. We weren't just competing for grades or recognition, we were competing for our futures, our identities. "So what now?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. I could feel the question hang in the air, suspended between us. Well, what would happen if we stopped fighting against each other and instead acknowledged what we both felt? The road ahead seemed uncertain, but there was something in that moment, something in her eyes that told me we were no longer just rivals. But for now, I didn't say that. Instead, I nodded, my heart racing as I realized the truth. We were both caught in something bigger than we could handle. And somewhere along the way, our rivalry had become more than just academic. It had become personal.